My name's Lizzie Coles-Kemp, and I am the Digital Responsibility Research Fellow for RISCS. My own background is that I look at the intersections between what makes people safe and secure and what makes technology safe and secure. And digital responsibility is a really exciting area to extend that. In this fellowship, we're looking at responsibility as obligations and duties as they play out in a digital setting. This is particularly important because when responsibility fails, we can end up with software that's not usable, that isn't fit for purpose for people who are using the technologies. We also wind up in a situation where there's a clash of goals between the organization and the individual, and that can lead to workarounds and unexpected security practices. And at a societal level, responsibility is also fundamental because when it breaks down, when that understanding of digital responsibility breaks down, we can wind up in a situation where parts of society become more insecure, particularly in a setting as we've had the last 12 months, where we've moved from digital by default to digital by necessity, and where it also becomes difficult to bring societal security together so that we have the environment in which that we need for safe and secure digital transactions. Next slide, please. So in this illustration here by Alice Angus, artist that I've been working with as part of a series of projects, what Alice is showing is that the reaction that many of the participants that we work with experience, in fact, probably we all experience, that the pace of digital transformation is growing, the pace of our dependency and our working with digital technologies is increasing, and that can be confusing to understand what's needed from us and what we can expect from other people. So this theme really looks at the intersection between this responsibility and what makes information security effective in that setting. So how we can turn that picture from one of chaos into one where we have some structure and some order and that people are able to cooperate in a digital space. So to start with what we did, was we worked with early careers researchers to understand what was going on in the space, to understand what research was already happening in related areas, in responsible research and innovation, in ethics, in studies of societal and group security, to see what we could, see how we could extend that to look specifically at the area of responsibility. And we also work with practitioners to understand how research in this area contributed to real world problems and would have impact in work and in societal settings. So our first year program was that we started with a reading group. This is actually much underused mechanism where we can bring researchers together from many different backgrounds. And in a sense, COVID played to our advantage here because we were able to run a series of 4 online reading groups where we looked at an academic paper each week that had a different perspective on digital responsibility. And I was really, really surprised by the range of disciplines from media studies to politics to computer science to sociology to information security that took part in that, and how also practitioners, we had about 20-25% of the participants that we had actually came from practitioner community, and really great to see that carry on with that spirit of RISCS, of bringing academia and practice together. And we had around about, on average, around about 30 participants every week. It kind of went up and down, but that was what we had. And we sustained that over 4 weeks, which I think shows a big interest in this area. And then in December, we ran a practitioner-focused workshop where 40 people from industry and business came in to look at the area of digital responsibility and to unpack the different themes. And we saw the different aspects of responsibility, from responsible research and innovation to ethics and practices within the workplace, to the ways in which we design and create digital environments so that they're as inclusive as possible. And all these themes came up from that workshop. Then in the next phase, which is the one that we're in at the moment, which will run until Easter, we decided to run an initial case study that looked at how all these themes play out in practice. And the topic that picked, it came from work that we've done in an adjacent project looking at digital identity, where the topic of assisted digital access, how people help each other to access digital environments, often informally, often outside of the bounds of normal security policies and practices, how digital responsibility cashed out in that space and what that could tell us about digital responsibility. Next slide, please. So in this next illustration by Alice, we see a site that's familiar where in this picture, we have somebody who's trying to access online banking, and they're doing that without without assistance, doing that using a digital platform, and trying to navigate how they should do that and what they need to do and what sort of support is available. And we found that in the case study workshops that we did, what we did is we worked with people who provide assistance in settings like that. And what we recognized very quickly is that assistance is not just down to very specific interactions, but actually works right the way across the workplace, the home, and in community settings. We discovered that responsibility is core when providing safe support, so working out duties and obligations for all parties in order to deliver support that's both safe to the service provider, but also safe to the individual. But in addition to that, the quality of support, the quality of information, targeting the support information to the people who need it in a way that can be accessed is also an important part of responsibility. And to carefully work out what the distribution of tasks is. So in this picture here, it isn't enough for somebody to assist the woman in that, but for the woman to be actively involved in that assistance and to understand what assistance they're getting and what the implications of that assistance is. Next slide, please. There are several things that we learned. When we started out with digital responsibility, I think it's safe to say that responsibility was thought of very much as a bureaucratic activity, something where we assigned roles and responsibilities. This case study has really emphasized what we learned in the reading groups and what we learned in the workshop and really brought it to life to show that it's also a means, a mechanism through which all parties share risk and have goals in common. It's not about moving risk from one place to another, but looking at the way in which we share and cooperate with risk. And that also responsibility and agreeing responsibilities is an important means of having goals in common. It's an important means of setting out what the joint endeavour is between all parties. And where there's disagreement there, where there's fundamental disagreement, responsibilities break down and we get insecurities. The case study also shows that traditional security approaches of regulating, of creating policies, of creating the bureaucratic structure in order to make security work, there's a problem with that, with digital responsibility, that what we discovered was that the responsibilities really had to come from the ground up, had to come through agreement, had to come through cooperation and collaboration for them to be effective. Next slide, please. So our key messages are that we have to understand what the motivation is for setting responsibilities. Is there this joint goal? And where there isn't a joint goal, whether we can actually establish that. That this is an aspect of security that requires reciprocity, requires sharing of risk and of trust. And that's important. We have to figure out who it is that who's the other parties in this. And in this other picture, this next picture by Alice Angus, that picture that we've got of all the different aspects of digital security in our everyday lives, that has to be bound by this sense of reciprocity. Who's providing support for whom and under what conditions, and how are we supporting each other? And then finally, that responsibility is a mechanism through which we distribute both risk and trust. Next slide, please. So we have a call to action. This is a great group. Thank you so much for being here today. It's really exciting to be able to take these findings back to you and show you where our thinking currently is. But in this next year of digital responsibility, we're going to run a number of iterations of these case studies where we can work with groups to understand the phenomenon of digital responsibility as it plays out in the wild, and then see how we can take this forward to policymakers and technologists. And the next iteration is we want to do an organizational case study to understand how digital responsibilities cash out in the workplace. And I would be delighted to hear from anybody who would think that's something that would really work for their organization. We're going to keep publishing results. We're going to publish a result, our report over the coming phases through the RISCS website. And I'd be delighted to hear from anybody who wants to be a partner with us on that. And then finally, I'd like to thank RISCS, to thank NCSE for a really collaborative process in this first phase, and I look forward to taking that forward in the next phase. I'd also like to thank participants in the different activities that we've done, some of whom are on the call today. Thank you so much for that. And finally, as always, indebted to Alice Angus, who I've worked with now for the last 10 years, to really bring this work and what are often quite abstract concepts to life. And thank her for her generosity to release these under a Creative Commons license. Thank you.